Are you listening? Can you read the room? You want to know the rhetorical situation. That is all the elements about your speaking to an audience at your kid's school conference, to a meeting, to a birthday party that you're giving a toast or anniversary, or if you're in a traditional public speaking auditorium and you're speaking to a large audience. Who are you speaking to? You want to read the room. All right, so one is listen before, during, and after your talk. The audience is having a conversation with you. They're looking down at their phone, shrugging their shoulders, rolling their eyes, have their arms crossed, they're leaning in, they're interested, they're smiling, they're laughing. This is real time data that's coming back and forth. And so you want to bring all that in and adjust accordingly. You want to adapt. If you see you're losing them, maybe you need to pause, ask them a question. So have some questions ready to go, right? Ask them a question and get them re-engaged. So this is a general simple slide that says read the room, slow down, speed up, speak louder, speak softer, explain things differently. Just make sure that you are absorbing what's going on in the real-time data that is being fed back to you. Part of reading the room is audience analysis, knowing your audience. You don't need a Google sheet to do this. So let's give an example that shows a wide gap between what they are. If you're going to give a speech on a topic to a small group of adults that are at your place of work, and you're going to talk about a new piece of software you just got, Slack, and you're going to explain it. You take that same content, that same speech, now you have to speak to middle schoolers. What are you going to do? Your delivery is going to be different. The words you choose are going to be different. Your pace and your tone are going to be different. Your eye contact is going to be different. Your posture is going to be different, right? That's part of audience analysis. Know your audience. All right. Middle schoolers and work. It's not as different for everything else that you may think. If you have a marketing proposal for your company, but you're selling it to the C-suite, to the executives, you're going to address different points than if you're going to sell it to the rest of your marketing team, right? They're more savvy on marketing terminology and the depth of nuance of marketing. You're going to speak to that audience. If you're going to go and you're going to speak to the executives, they don't know that nuance. Most of them probably don't have that depth of knowledge when it comes to marketing. This happens all the time. If you're not thinking about your audience, they're not thinking about you. If you don't make the value obvious, your audience is going to tune out. You want to ask what's in it for them. Every audience has that one question, and they want to know, why should I care? Why am I here? And so, make sure you get that off the bat. You want to say that, you want to be clear, and as you go through, and especially at the end, you want to be clear on what your content was. There's something called the primacy recency effect. We remember the first thing people say, and we remember the last thing they say when it comes to content, factual data. All that middle stuff kind of gets lost sometimes. So you want to make sure you tell them why they should care right off the bat. And then, of course, at the end, primacy recency, the most recent thing, you want them to remember that also. So make sure that you say, okay, what's in it for them? And then what's their goals? What are the things that they're going to, sink their teeth into? And so you want to tie the message to those goals, to the things that they're going to sink their teeth into. So this isn't dumbing down your message. It's dialing it in to your audience. One of the biggest struggles that I have when students are given speeches is for them to follow one of the line items that I have in a speech outline for building a speech, which we're going to get to, is finding common ground. And so agreement isn't necessary. We might hyper focus on, I want you to agree with me, which we'll get there a little bit later. But the thing is, a connection is important. You don't need to think alike. We all don't need to think alike in order for you to speak meaningfully. So what do we need to do to find some common ground? It is not that difficult. So when we talked earlier about audience analysis and knowing your audience, wait, there's some stuff you know right off the bat. Let's say you're going to speak at some uh, parent-teacher association meeting, right? You're going to go speak. That's it. That's all information I'm going to give you. What do you know about your audience that you can try and find common ground? Well, you all have kids there. If somebody's showing up and they're not doesn't have a kid there, maybe call the police, right? So right there, that's one thing of common ground that you can find. There's probably a small rate age range that you can say, oh, most of these people that I'm going to speak to are between 25 and 45 or whatever it may be. You also know, well, I'm speaking at this school, so they probably live within this bubble, this radius, and you can keep going. And so you can find common ground. There are a million ways for you to step back and say, okay, I need to find common ground to make my comments resonate where they actually care and I create a connection. There is one of the most powerful principles of persuasion is called unity. And that is our uh, behavioral, social, evolutionary desire to be with others and to be with others that we have some commonality to. And so, let's say, for example, you get a brand new job and you move across country, whatever coast you're on, you move to the other coast, right? And so you have this new job and you're there for Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday. You don't know anybody, right? And then all of a sudden on Thursday, there's a meeting, company wide meeting, 60 people. Everybody's milling about, drinking some coffee, waiting for it to start. And you've been there now almost a week and you've said hi to a few people, but nothing has gone anywhere. There's no sense that you belong there. There's no connection. And so as you're sitting there waiting for this meeting to start, you look over and you see the person next to you has a sweatshirt that has your high school mascot on it and the name of your high school. What are you going to do? Immediately, you're going to start talking to that person. You're going to bring up that connection. That power of unity is one of the most powerful principles of persuasion. It's what we do we seek out connection and we feel like that, oh my God, there's somebody from my tribe. And so that connection is what you want to seek. That connection is what you want to craft in your speech. And it is not that difficult. We just did the example of you going to a PTA meeting, parent teacher association meeting. And so if you're going to a conference and it was a conference for accounting, well, what do you know? It's most likely accountants. They all went to a conference. They're all traveling, they're away from home. Those are all things that you can incorporate into the beginning of your speech, right? Everybody flew there, so you can make a reference to flying and how that brings us all together. Of course, that's some substance to it in connection to your speech. You can make a reference to the fact that this is the biggest accounting conference there is. I've never been to an accounting conference, but that's what it could be. And so our instinct, our tribal instinct, is so strong that once you do that, they're going to lean in and be more engaged with your speech. So people listen more intently to members of their own tribe.
Let's talk about ethical speaking. So influence is powerful. So use it with care. But what does that mean? Uh, Represent facts accurately. If you have some study, and it says 70% improvement, don't say 80% improvement to round it up. Do it factually. Don't represent some statistic in a cherry pick manner, which doesn't accurately reflect statistic. Because what's going to happen is you're misleading, you're being unethical. However, a lot of the times people will know. They'll be familiar with something or they're interested. You might have moved them and they're going to look it up and they're going to realize that you were exaggerating. So what happens is all the other things that you might have shared, which may be legit and powerful, they've just lost all credibility. Another thing is avoid emotional manipulation. There was a speech I was just grading, and the student gave her speech or during a speech, and she put on a video of someone who was very distraught emotionally. It didn't add any facts or any value. it was really prying upon emotions. And so what happened is you would feel it like, wow, this person's really, upset and they're moved by this, but it was kind of far removed from what the intent was. So it actually felt like our heartstrings were being pulled in a manipulative manner. Another thing is acknowledge opposing viewpoints, right? So we call them anticipating rebuttals. So if you are going to give a speech on anything, you're at work and you're going to give a persuasive speech because you were tasked with finding a new piece of communication software and you want to use Slack. Slack's a good one. You want to use Slack. And so be honest with that. So if you come back and then you speak and say all these benefits of Slack, but there's two or three very common rebuttals that your audience will know. And you're speaking about like, yeah, as a company, let's adopt Slack. Let's change everything we do and go Slack. And they know these shortcomings. They're just going to be waiting like, yeah. And when you don't fulfill, and you don't address the shortcomings, they're simply going to say, wow, this person clearly is not being honest and open and ethical and transparent with us. So you're going to lose credibility immediately. The other thing is use inclusive language. If you're going to talk about a person that fights fires, use firefight. It's accurate, it's powerful, it's dead on. Everybody knows what it is instead of using fireman or policeman, right? Use inclusive language. It's an easy thing to do. There's no loss for any of us speaking. And we're being inclusive, which means more people will not be tuning out or getting a negative impression. So just remember persuasion without ethics is manipulation. You have to be credible. So we touched on it a little bit in the last slide with ethical speaking. However, when we get to the point where there's a speech outline and we're like, hey, you're going to build your speech, make sure you have your introduction, your transitions, and one of them is credibility. Make sure you establish credibility. It's actually not very difficult, but it's oftentimes not addressed. And so then the audience is like, all right, why is this person telling me about this? So, for example, credibility, you can actually speak about something that you're not an expert on by a long shot. But what you do is you establish credibility by saying, hey, I'm going to speak about this topic as a newbie, somebody just coming into it. That's credible because you are credibly a newbie coming into that topic. And so that's an oftentimes a thing that people want to hear from that perspective. Let's say you're not into gaming and you just get into it and you become a gamer and you're going to talk about Call of Duty, right? You come in and say, hey, I was kind of overwhelmed and now I'm going to speak about Call of Duty from someone who's just stepping into the realm of Call of Duty. All the people that are just stepping into the realm, they're gonna connect with you and you're gonna establish credibility where they're gonna lean in and they're going to be more open to the things that you have to say. So share your experiences, your knowledge, your background, your connection to the topic. Again, you don't have to be the expert in the topic, just be an expert in the framework that you are delivering it. Speak with clarity and confidence. That's why when you give a speech, you should practice. If it's going to be an impromptu speech, you should practice. What? How do you practice an impromptu speech? You can. So we'll get into that in the impromptu section, but you can practice impromptu speaking right now and get ready for the next one. The other thing is avoid overpromising and avoid some hard dodging hard truths. With the overpromising, you don't want to open up and say, by the time I'm done, you're going to change your mind and you're never going to eat meat again. And that's pretty tough, right? So you don't want to do that, right? So your credibility, it's not about impressing, it's about establishing who you are and why you're speaking. And then what you want to do is you want to reinforce that throughout your speech. Somehow you can weave that in, not by saying, I'm credible, I'm awesome. You can say things that establish credibility without you stating, I'm credible. So make sure you pass the eye roll test. And what that is this very scientific test that I came up with. So if you're going to write your speech or you're thinking in your head what you're going to say, if for any moment you think that somebody's going to roll their eyes, like, yeah, whatever, like, I don't buy that, then just step back and say, you know what? Let me establish credibility so I can pass that eye roll test.